Hi everyone, it's Miss Leah again, and we are back with L Jam Storytime. Today's book is called The Story of the Saxophone, written by Lesa Cline-Ransome and illustrated by James E. Ransom. Here we go. The story of the saxophone doesn't begin with Dexter Gordon or Charlie Parker. This story isn't told by Lester Young and Coleman Hawkins. It didn't start on a New Orleans street corner with Sidney Bechet. It began in 1814, far, far away across the seas in Dinant, Belgium. The story began with a young boy named Joseph Antoine Adolphe Sax, the only son of an instrument maker. Everyone called him Adolphe. Adolphe was often bored, so he daydreamed, especially when he should have been paying attention. By the time he was 10, he had fallen down a flight of stairs, swallowed a needle, been poisoned 3 times, nearly drowned, been burned by gunpowder, and been knocked into a coma from a loose roof tile. But Adolf was bored and curious and smart. An absolutely wonderful combination for a boy who loved to invent. His father let him be while Adolf tested and tinkered and tweaked with keys and levers and reeds. Adolf played flute, clarinet, and nearly every instrument you could imagine, including his own creations: the steam organ, the sax tuba, the sax trombone, the euphonium, the bass tuba, and the flugelhorn. But Adolf was just daydreaming of a new sound, just the right sound. Adolf had listened to symphonies and marches and marching bands with their grand brass sections, whimsical woodwinds, and lyrical strings. He knew that they needed an instrument that was not as loud as a trumpet, not as soft as a clarinet, somewhere right in the middle. He assembled one crazy contraption after the next. Some made sounds that were too tinny, others too bold. He added a reed and a mouthpiece, a neck and a body, a thumb hook and a bell. He listened and played, took notes, took it all apart and started again. Finally, he was done. With one long breath, Adolf blew into the mouthpiece, and his instrument came to life. It played the high, sweet notes of a clarinet with the deep, low tones of a trumpet and the delicacy of a violin. It was his masterpiece. Except the judges at the Belgian National Exhibition didn't agree. One competitor kicked Adolph's masterpiece across the floor. Adolph carefully wrapped his dented invention, packed a few belongings and all the money he had, and boarded a train to Paris. Parisians knew their food and their art, their fashion and their wine, and they certainly felt they knew more about music than this young boy from Belgium. And so, in Paris, the city of love, everyone hated Adolphe and his crazy new instrument. Everyone, that is, except for his friend, the famous composer, Hector Berlioz. When he heard Adolphe play his newest invention, he proclaimed to his audiences, It cries, sighs, and dreams. He renamed Adolph's masterpiece the saxophone. Adolphe wanted his instrument in French military bands. Friends helped him play his saxophone for the royal court, and they agreed to let him try out his instrument, as only the French would, in a duel. A musical duel between the French military band and a band with Adolphe's saxophones. On the day of the duel, several in Adolphe's band were bribed to stay home. A few more never arrived, so Adolphe strapped two saxophones to his neck and joined the band. The addition of sax's new instruments made every other instrument sound better. By the end of the first round, the crowd burst into cheers for Adolphe's band. Within months, the saxophones were a part of every regimental band in Paris. The word of these new saxophones reached Prussia. They insisted Sax make more for their bands. And when Italy, Spain, and Hungary heard about these serpentine saxophones, they placed their orders. Some were suspicious of this instrument that curved like a snake and made the seductive sounds of a human voice. They called it a devil's horn, though finally much of the world saw the genius of Adolphe Sax. But bad luck still seemed to follow him. Jealous competitors sued, workers blackmailed him, tools were stolen, his workshop burned to the ground, a bomb was placed under his bed, and he narrowly escaped a stabbing. He developed a tumor on his lip so large he could no longer eat. His tumor was cured. He rebuilt his factory. His family of saxophones grew: soprano, sopranino, alto, tenor, baritone, bass, 14 in all. By now, Adolphe Sax was popular in England, Portugal, Russia, Spain, Switzerland, Turkey, and his native Belgium. He was a famous genius. But being famous didn't help his bank account. Finally, he gave over his factory to his sons and sold off his collection of instruments and tools. Emperor Napoleon III loved music, especially Adolphe's saxophone. When the French went to war with Mexico in 1861, the emperor brought the French military band with him to Veracruz. The French army lost one battle, won another, but the French military band and its saxophones were the real victors. They played at every battle, wailing in defeat, lifting spirits, rousing troops, shouting victory until the French lost the war. Florencio Ramos, a member of the Mexican cavalry band, heard those French saxophones. He got his hand on one and later traveled across the Gulf to New Orleans to the World's Industrial and Cotton Centennial Expo in 1884. New Orleans had jazz and new music from Africa, Europe, and America, pieced together like parts of the saxophone. Ramos decided to stay in the city filled with music. Adolphe passed away in 1894, but in New Orleans and other cities, his saxophone lived on street corners and in juke joints, at funerals and in jazz clubs. The sound of the saxophone spread to every corner of New Orleans. Only now people called it the saxophone. One day, when a New Orleans clarinetist named Sidney Bechet picked up a saxophone that blew low and slow, just how he liked it, he put down his clarinet and never picked it up again. Coleman Hawkins heard Sidney play, and Lester Young heard Coleman play, and Charlie Parker heard Lester play, and Dexter Gordon heard Charlie play, and everyone heard Dexter play the saxophone that began far, far away across the seas in a workshop in Belgium made by a boy everyone called Adolf. The end. And this book is called The Story of the Saxophone, written by Lesa Cline-Ransome and James E. Ransom. I really hope you enjoyed this book as much as I did, and I will see you next time at LJAM Storytime. Bye.